Qatar tightened restrictions on commercial activities on Tuesday, ordering all shops to close until the end of the month as part of measures to stem the spread of COVID-19. The decision taken at a cabinet meeting exempts pharmacies, food supply stores, and food deliveries. Malls and dine-in restaurants were already closed, but other stores had still been operating. The country of some 2.8 million on Monday reported 1,364 new COVID-19 cases, raising the total to 33,969, the second highest infection count after larger neighbor the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia among 6 Gulf Arab states. Its death toll from the virus stands at 15. When the Islamic Republic of Iran began to reopen late last month, commuters bagged subways and buses. Shoppers crowded the traditional bazaars of Isfahan and Tehran. 3 weeks later, the country has been hit by a new surge of coronavirus cases, according to health officials in some of the 8 provinces where the numbers have spiked again. Health experts had predicted this would happen when the government made the call to ease restrictions in late April. Iran, an epicenter of the outbreak in the Middle East, reopened without meeting the benchmarks recommended by health experts, such as ensuring widespread testing and contact tracking was in place and recording steady drop in cases for at least several weeks. Planes are flying again on a handful of international routes, creating a possible path to recovery for a battered industry. This month, China and South Korea opened a tightly controlled travel corridor between Seoul and 10 Chinese regions, including Shanghai. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania lifted travel restrictions between the 3 Baltic states last Friday. Australia and New Zealand are also working to resume flights between the two countries. The unique accords have emerged as templates for airlines that have been pushed to the brink by the industry's worst ever crisis and for countries desperate to salvage some tourism as the world enters a deep recession. But they also highlight the biggest challenge to re-establishing international travel. There is little agreement on what kind of protections could limit the risk of spreading COVID-19 across borders. Opposing sides in Syria's conflict have agreed to reconvene in Geneva for negotiations on the constitution, United Nations Special Envoy Geir Pedersen said Tuesday, adding that a lull in fighting could provide an opportunity to start healing deep mistrust between them. He said as soon as the pandemic situation allows, they have agreed to come to Geneva and they have agreed on an agenda for the next meeting. He did not give a date and said that a virtual meeting of the Constitutional Committee would not be possible. In the same briefing, Pedersen also repeated a message made to the UN Security Council Monday and urged the United States and Russia to talk about a push for peace. A rocket struck Baghdad's heavily fortified Green Zone, the seat of Iraq's government, early on Tuesday morning, according to an Iraqi military statement, the first attack on the area since a new prime minister was sworn in earlier this month. The Katyusha rocket hit an empty house, causing minor damages. The Green Zone is where government buildings and foreign embassies are located. The military statement said a preliminary investigation indicated the rocket was launched from the nearby Al Idris neighborhood on Palestine Street. Previous attacks have frequently targeted the U.S. presence in Iraq, including the U.S. Embassy and Iraqi bases hosting American troops. A UN report said on Tuesday civilian casualties from operations conducted by the warring sides in Afghanistan escalated in April compared to the same period last year. The United Nations called for a halt to the fighting and the start of intra-Afghan peace talks as part of a deal signed between the United States and the Taliban in February. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan said the Taliban were responsible for 208 civilian casualties in April and government forces for 172. The fighting has intensified in Afghanistan between the government forces and the Taliban militants despite the US-Taliban peace deal. Eastern Libyan forces pulled out of parts of Tripoli overnight, they said, after losing one of their main strongholds in western Libya Tuesday, in a major blow to their year-long campaign to seize the capital. Libyan National Army spokesman Ahmed al-Mismari said the force had carried out redistribution and repositioning in the battlefronts, disengaging from some crowded residential areas. It has been fighting for more than a year to capture Tripoli, seat of the Government of National Accord, which is recognized by the United Nations, and has moved onto the front foot in the war since January with military help from Turkey. The leader of Lesotho, accused of being behind the murder of his estranged wife, announced his resignation on Tuesday, possibly paving the way for him to be formally charged in the killing. Prime Minister Thomas Thabane said in a televised address that his time to retire and withdraw from public life had finally arrived after clinging to Lesotho's highest political office for months. Mr. Thabane, who is 80 years old, a willing political survivor who has served in every administration since the tiny Southern African nation gained independence in 1966, had tried to remain in power despite mounting pressure from his own camp to leave. After a 78-day delay, China's parliament begins its annual session this week and is expected to unveil stimulus measures to spur an economy battered by COVID-19 as leaders grappled with problems from surging unemployment to worsening U.S. ties. The National People's Congress will open Friday in Beijing's stately Great Hall of the People in the clearest sign yet that life is returning to normal after the coronavirus. But President Xi Jinping faces unprecedented challenges with his long-term economic goals under threat and an urgent need to revive growth and fend off big job losses that could threaten stability. Hong Kong on Tuesday extended antivirus measures limiting public gatherings until June 4th, a move that means an annual vigil marking the Tiananmen crackdown will likely not take place for the first time in 30 years. The candlelight vigil usually attracts huge crowds and is the only place on Chinese soil where such a major commemoration of the anniversary is still allowed. Last year's gathering was especially large and came just a week before 7 months of pro-democracy protests and clashes exploded onto the city streets, sparked initially by a plan to allow extraditions to the authoritarian mainland. Farmers in China are being offered cash to quit breeding exotic animals as pressure grows to crack down on the illegal wildlife trade that has been blamed for the COVID-19 outbreak. Animal rights activists said that authorities have for the first time pledged to buy out breeders in an attempt to curb the practice. China has in recent months banned the sale of wild animals for food, citing the risk of diseases spreading to humans, but the trade remains legal for other purposes, including research and traditional medicine. The deadly coronavirus, the first reported in the central Chinese city of Wuhan, is widely believed to have passed from bats to people before spreading worldwide. Authorities in eastern India and Bangladesh were relocating tens of thousands of villagers away from the coastline on Tuesday ahead of a super cyclone that is expected to inflict large-scale damage as both countries struggle to contain COVID-19. Coronavirus quarantine shelters in India were being converted to cyclone shelters, leaving authorities to manage social distancing to try to prevent the spread of coronavirus. In neighboring Bangladesh, officials were moving people to higher ground and urged them to maintain social distance and wear masks, as the country has recorded over 20,995 coronavirus cases and 314 deaths so far. India's weather office said the supercyclone Amphan had reached winds of up to 240 km per hour with gusts of around 265 km per hour over the Bay of Bengal on Monday night and was expected to make a landfall on Wednesday.